Hi, it's Kimbun. I have been feeling under the weather over the weekends, but I'm back now with some thoughts on the latest happenings in Singapore. I want to get straight into our topic of the day today with these two news articles. So, what do you see them in common? So, during GE 2025, politicians have talked the talk, and you know what? I'm really happy to see that many are also walking the talk too. You know how the PAP can be perceived as the guys who say hello, how are you during elections, and hello, who are you after? So for those of you that are second guessing DPM Gan Kim Yong's latest initiative, let me just say this. DPM Gan said that he was going to do more for Pongo during his campaign, and he has followed through with his promises. In fact, there is no reason why this trial couldn't be extended to other constituencies. And we can be cynical and say that this is political expedience, but hey, if Singaporeans benefit along the way, I'm all for this. Now, let's talk about the flip side. You also have Singaporeans that lament how the opposition disappears after elections, only to reappear every 5 years. Nope, you don't get to say that either anymore. Because over the weekend, I read about the idea of a shadow cabinet proposed by the Red Dot United. Again, no affiliation with this Red Dot perspective. Have you ever found yourself calling the alternative parties Mosquito parties? And there's no way you will ever vote for them unless they show some skin in the game? Well, this is the RDU doing exactly what you asked for. So surely naysayers that levered this criticism are not above walking the talk themselves and take some time to see how their criticisms are being addressed. Now, it's easy to write off this idea as another wild one post-GE by another opposition party. And turns out, former Prime Minister Mr. Goh Chok Tong had considered a shadow cabinet during GE 2011. So it seems like this idea is something worth considering from both sides of the aisle, and that's what we're going to do today. First things first, shadow cabinets are not new. In fact, this has been a feature of the Westminster parliaments, including in the UK, and this was discussed a couple of months ago by the good folks over at Inconvenient Questions, and this was their editor-in-chief, Mr. Wiswa.
At a very basic level, the role of the opposition is to be a check on the ruling party. In Westminster, in London, to facilitate this role, the leading opposition party would usually form what's called a shadow cabinet, which will table alternative policy proposals to counter government policy positions.
Back in 2011, then PM Mr. Goh Chok Tong considered that backbenchers, NMPs, and members of government parliamentary committees could form this shadow cabinet. You may remember that this was a time where there were only two elected opposition MPs in the form of Mr. Chiam See Tong and Mr. Loh Tak Kiang. So by extension, this shadow cabinet was almost surely going to consist entirely of PAP members. I see the merits in that it sets up the next generation of leaders who can step up when the time comes, but the demerits are quite significant. In elections, voters look at the potential and or track record of candidates from municipal and parliamentary perspectives. And I think it's a good thing that Singaporeans lean conservative in their choice of MPs, which then reflects the selection of the cabinet that prioritizes safety in all aspects of government. After all, I don't want someone crazy running budget, that's for sure. But if there's a Tier 2 PAP team ready to go, that would effectively cripple opposition chances of getting into Parliament. Not impossible, but very challenging. Also, I was reminded of what Dr. Tan Cheng Bock from the Progress Singapore Party and what he said during one of his GE 2025 rallies.
The people who's manning the political systems are the same kind of people. This is dangerous. In medical terms, I call it inbreeding. And when there's inbreeding, let me tell you, my friends, when there's inbreeding, there's no change of idea because everyone is scared.
So having the same group effectively checking itself, I do not think that that's the kind of check and balance that Singaporeans have consistently voted for. Therefore, it stands to some reason that what the RDU proposed may be a good middle ground. They have kept the details fairly high level, but I'm going to assume that it's not very different from what we see in the UK today. To use a soccer analogy, who remembers the 2010 UEFA Champions League matches between Manchester United and AC Milan where Man U eventually won 7-2 on the aggregate? To me, that came down to Mr. Ji Song Park's top man marking of Milan's playmaker, Pirlo, that effectively nullified his existence from the game. So think of Pirlo as the minister for the Ministry of Midfielders, and Mr. Ji Song Park as the shadow minister. Unlike soccer, the shadow minister's job is not to destroy the incumbent. His job is to critique government proposals relevant to the midfield, propose alternative ones, and generally serve as a counterweight. Now, you extend this across the entire soccer team, or in reality, the government, and this man-to-man marking system is the shadow cabinet that the RDU is proposing. So one of the benefits of the shadow cabinet is that it allows the government to take in specialized subject matter experts. For example, few would argue that Dr. Paul Tambaya from the Singapore Democratic Party does not bring a wealth of knowledge from the medical domain, knowledge that the Health Minister, Mr. Ong Ye Kung, and Singaporeans could benefit from. Also, I look at how certain government functions would be better served with practitioners of those with deep domain knowledge. One good example is a finance portfolio. After all, when was the last time you saw a CFO of a company come with no finance background? As far as I can see, PM Wong, Second Minister Indrani Raja, Senior Minister of State Jeffrey Sell do not have that sort of a background, so a shadow counterpart with a CPA or deep industry practice could be quite valuable for the ministry and for Singapore. Now, some of you who are more politically attuned may remember the co-driver analogy from GE 2011, and in fact, it was revived in this GE 2025.
Some of you may remember 2011. They say opposition presence in parliament is like a co-driver, sitting next to PAP, which is the driver. If the PAP driver fall asleep, the co-driver will slap his head and you will wake up and drive again. Singaporeans, I must say, by and large, do not disagree with the analogy, and that there is a role for the opposition. But then when the opposition presence grow and expand to another GRC, that co-driver becomes more than a co-driver. It becomes also a backseat driver. So when you drive, he start giving you instruction, turn left, turn right, stop, slow down.
So RDU announced the idea of a shadow cabinet in conjunction with their 3B strategy. One of these Bs is breaking away from being a check and balance on the PAP. Essentially, they are saying that they do not want to be a co-driver anymore, and I think that's a hard sell to Singaporeans. They are a party that has a 6-year or so track record, and in an election where 27 candidates forfeited their election deposit, I think the RDU had a pretty decent showing. But to tell voters that they have the means to form or attract their opposition counterparts to join them and shadow run the country, I think in Minister Ong's word, being a backseat driver may be a step too far for Singaporeans. That is not to say that the RDU should give up. I think a good compromise may be an enhanced version of Mr. Loh Tak Yang's version of a co-driver. Instead of only slapping the driver when he is asleep, when the car is back to normal after said slapping, the co-driver can take them to a driving center and show them how to drive properly. I think this form of a shadow cabinet as an enhanced version of a co-driver could have more traction with Singaporeans. Now, the shadow cabinet is not without its flaws. There's a numbers problem. First, you may have noticed that many alternative parties, even the Workers' Party, struggle to find good talents to field as candidates as MP. And of the lot, the number with the caliber to be ministers will be very limited. Again, I use the soccer analogy. Most of you soccer fans know that man marking is an almost dying art, and soccer is almost played with a zonal system these days. So why not apply the same concepts? So until such a time that our alternative parties have sufficient resources to fully shadow the government of the day, why not consider breaking the roles into logical domains? In fact, this logical split already exists today. You have Mr. Task Force Man, who essentially manages the economic side of things. You have our 3 coordinating ministers covering national security, public services, and social policies. Could we not have 1 or 2 shadow members shadowing these 4 broad categories and see if they can add value? So instead of needing 17 shadow members, they would only need 4 to 8 top talents. That seems like a reasonable ask. Another issue that was highlighted by the Singapore Democratic Alliance. So last Sunday, I had the opportunity to attend one of the events and raised a question on the shadow cabinet. Their chairman, Mr. Desmond Lim, highlighted that an important consideration for success is the alignment of ideology. After all, you do not want opposition to come together only to disband because of differences in thinking, and that will further damage the opposition bloc. I mean, rightfully or wrongly, something that negatively impacts one often impacts the overall impression of our alternative parties and independent candidates. Lastly, I do not want to throw further cold water on the idea too much, but I hope that there will continue to be a balance of inroads made by our opposition in both municipal and parliamentary aspects. A shadow cabinet, if executed correctly, will go a long way towards the latter, but Singapore's politics has always rewarded the grassroots heroes. You know how the PAP runs an anchor minister strategy and the WP runs a two veteran strategy to keep their constituencies? In GE 2025, this GRC strategy has evolved to what I call an anchor MP strategy. Someone who is deep in the grassroots, even with an average presence in parliament, can single-handedly win the GRC for their party. Just look at Mr. Bay in Tampines, Ms. Sun Xueling in Punggol, and Mr. Liang in Bukit Panjang. I hope that while our opposition continue to make inroads on the parliamentary track, that they do not forget their roots in the grass, so to speak, and continue to put in the resources and manpower, however challenging that may be, to walk the ground over the next 5 years.
I'm sure people will be very unhappy with me, but I will say this, I think the Mosquito party should all just go away. You know, I mean, some of them, it is already the case in the past few elections that you are not gaining traction. You know, so what are you trying to do?
So that when people talk about alternative parties as mosquitoes, they're referring to the type that are always present and sticks around come hell or high water. And with that, we come to the end of today's episode. So what are your thoughts about this post-GE 2025 initiatives from the PAP and our alternative parties? What should they do more or less? I would love to hear more about your thoughts in the comment section. And until next time, this is our Red Dot Perspective.